All right, let's take a look at where we left off last time. We created this little floor. If I press play and I use my WASD keys, I can move that floor around, and I'm gonna hit escape to exit out. In this video, we're gonna talk a little bit about variables. All right, so let's go up to the top here and go back into our level blueprint. And over on the side here, you could see we have functions, macros, variables. If I click on variables here and I hit plus, you can see it creates a new variable. Now, you can think of a variable as essentially a container or bucket. And a lot of times you'll hear people say like they're container types, right? And what that means is inside of this variable here, so we'll just call this var1, very generic, just indicating it's my first variable. And over here you can see there's a drop down here, and I can select all of these different container types, right? There's like these structures, there's these data structures, which also sort of contain more than one variable, and we'll get into that stuff later. And then here you could see there's these, this is essentially signifying what this variable can hold. So for example, if I wanted to hold whole numbers, right, I could use an integer here. If I want to hold floating point numbers, that's, point floating indicates like 1.0 or 12.01. Like, so this is a essentially a whole number with a decimal. And so we'll be doing that a lot. A Boolean just indicates 0 or 1 or true or false. You can also go over to the side here if I have this variable selected in my details panel, and I can click on this and I can also change the variable type here. I can also change the variable name here. Now, if you've done any programming before, or a little bit of programming, you might be familiar with this stuff. If you look at this little section off to the side here, you'll see that I can click a drop down and it gives me these other types. What we have set up right now is a single variable. That means we can store one variable. Below that, we have an array, which is storing multiple objects or multiple things of the same type. So for example, if this is an integer here, I change my variable into an integer, and I click this drop down, I can turn it into an array. What my array can do is it can store a string, like a bunch of numbers, not I think of a string as just like a long list, but more of a list of numbers. So this can store multiple variables. All right, so let's just kind of look at this in action. So we have this event begin play up here, and we're going to use that to print a string. So let's actually bring this back. And I'm going to delete this delay here for a moment. Let's get all that stuff out of there. And you can see this says print string. So actually, let's start with making this a single variable, and let's make it of type string, just so you can see this kind of working. And then there's a default value. It says, please compile the blueprint. So I'm going to go ahead and compile that. And you can see now in this variable, I can enter a value. So I could say, this is a variable of type string. And I can drag this out onto my, essentially my event graph. And I want to get this variable. I don't want to set the variable. Setting the variable changes the value. And when I get this variable, it gives me access to whatever it is containing. That's why they call them containers. And I can actually just link this right inside of here. And now what this is going to do is print this line, which is, this is a variable of type string. And for duration, I'll just leave it up there for like 100 seconds or something. Okay, so I'm going to compile, Command S to save that. I'm going to hit compile. And now when I press play, you can see this is a variable of type string. So it went ahead and played that for me. So let's go back into our, I'm going to click in the window and then hit escape. Back into my test bed here. All right, so what if I want to use this variable of type string, but I want to store more than one variable, right? So maybe this is not a variable. This is not essentially the name variable one. This is more storing items in an inventory system, right? Well, I can click over here and I can change this type to an array, and I will, it's giving me a little warning here. This could break connections here, and that's completely fine. I'm going to hit change variable type. And I guess ideally we could have just created that. That would have made this a little bit quicker. And let's go ahead and close this. I can always just recompile it. All right, so let's go ahead and add some more items to our items or inventory system. So I'm going to go ahead and hit compile here. And then you could see here my first element in my array. So say I am carrying a, let's see. Here, let's get rid of this. Let's break the connection. I'm just right-clicking, breaking the link. Let's recompile that. So the first item could be a stick, really you could just put whatever you want in here. And the next item is an apple. And the item after that is a, I don't know, phone. It's got like a cell phone or something. Let's compile and save that. Right, so you probably noticed when we had this originally connected that we got an error at the bottom, right? When we had changed the type, right? It's not even allowing me to connect it. The reason for that is this prints a single string, right? It only prints one of these elements, right, that are here. We have a stick, an apple, and a phone. Now, the thing I want you to think about with arrays is that we talked about, just the standard variable, right? A single variable, and that can store one thing. And as I mentioned, the array can store multiple elements, right? And I'm using the example of an inventory system because you can think of these as little boxes. So in box 0, 0 is the address or the index, we have a stick. And then in box 1, we have an apple. And then in box 2, we have a phone. And what's nice about this is in this one array container, this box or bucket or cabinet, the cabinet has these different drawers. So for example, if I want to access my stick, I can type getref, which is this right here under array. And at element 0, I can wire this into here and it'll understand that because it's saying, hey, you know what? In the items array, I want to get apple 1 and I want to print whatever the name of that or whatever is being stored in 0 rather, the first element, which starts at 0, which is a stick. So I'm going to go ahead and compile that and save, and then come back here and press play. And now you can see it says stick. So this is a good way of thinking about, variables, and then, these things called data structures, which are structures of data, right? Like an array is a structure or multiple elements in an array. All right, so as an exercise, let's go ahead and I would say pause the video. And what we can do is I want you to have it print the other two elements in this array, right? So index 1 and index 2. I want you to try to figure it out. And in between those, I want you to use a delay. We've done a little bit of delays in the first video. See if you could figure that out. So it'll delay for a second, print the next word, and then one after that. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video myself and set that up. All right, so let's take a look at the way I set this up. Now, there's a couple things to make this a little bit easier to read. Is they have these things called reroute nodes. So you can actually double click on the line and it'll create this reroute node. And these nodes can be used to sort of clarify or clear up the path to help it a little bit easier for others to see. So for example, I have this delay here, but what I can do is I can add a reroute node here. And it's not really intensive in the sense of like adding compile times or anything to have these. So they're just kind of nice to have and they're pretty clean. So you can see here now by adding that. But anyway, inside of here, I have get 0, get 1, and get 2. And then I have it running to a delay of 0.2 seconds. Let's do 1 second. And let's do this delay for 1 second here. And you could see that inside of here, the link that I have between each one of these nodes is it's running from event begin play. It prints my string. Well, what is it going to print? Whatever is in my slot for array, which is stick. It's going to delay for 1 second. Then it's going to go to this print string. It's going to play an apple, so on, and then phone. So let's compile that, see if that works. Good, we got a green check mark, which is really awesome. Let's go back into testbed and press play. So we have stick, we have apple, and then we have phone. Awesome. This is important. You always want to, this being the arrays or these structures are important because a lot of times and we have things like lists and stuff where we're traveling through a game and we dynamically, or in this particular case, we kind of, and like arrays are represented in most programming languages a fixed number of elements like boxes, but there's ways around that, which Unreal does. And so anyway, the whole point is, this is a nice way of saying creating a single, essentially variable name, just calling it inventory system, and then storing a lot of similar items within that inventory system, right? All right, so we have our arrays here, and we're getting these 3 items. Now, let's say I don't have an apple anymore, right? My character ate the apple, and we're going to change it to a mango. So what we can do is we can actually change that element and print it to the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this get, and I'm going to drag out from here a set array element. And here you can see it's saying, hey, what index do we want to change? So the index 1 here, which is apple, I want to change that. And then what is the item we're changing it to, right? So the item is, I don't know, mango, right? So if I type out mango here, and then I'm going to reroute that into this print string here. So it no longer says hello there. Oops, sorry. Oh, we have to wire this in as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to delay, wire this one in here, wire that there, and then what's going to happen here is now we're going to set the array element at index 1 into a mango, and it's going to print here, and it's going to store for 100 seconds. So let's compile and save, and let's play, see what happens. We have a stick, we have a phone, and we have hello. So what happened there? Well, let's go back and take a look. So what's happening here is we're never actually getting the item here, right? All we're doing is saying, hey, inside of the items array, I'm going to go through and just sort of print it, but we're going to skip. We're going to element 1. We're going to set the array to element, or sorry, index 0 here. So we're getting index 0. We're going to get it. We're going to print it. We're going to delay that. But we never re-get that value after we set it. So we're actually just skipping over element index 1, and we just go straight to 2. And that's why we got 0 and 2. So we actually have to drag this out here. And then we have to do get, and we're going to get a reference. And the reference we're going to get is for 1. And then we're going to, let's move this up a little bit this way. Now we're going to wire that in here. And now we should get, instead of apple, we could get a mango. Now we could actually, just for testing purposes, because remember, this is all a sequence, right? So inside of here, there's 3 things to any modern programming language in the sense of just kind of understanding it. There's a sequence, there's sequencing, which means the way things run. So that's what's really nice about visual scripting, is you can kind of see the sequence from event, begin, play. And there's branching, which we're going to talk about later, which are if statements and so forth. And there's looping, which is like how we can loop through an array, which we'll get to. So anyway, right now we have 0, 1, and then we're going to get this. So let's actually do this. Let's, before we set our array, let's go ahead and get this one more time. So I'm going to hit Command-C, Command-V, and I'm going to do, let's see, before we set our array, I'm going to print this one more time. So Command-C, Command-V, or Control-C, Command-V. Just going to wire this one into here, into this delay. I'm going to print it here. I'm not going to have a delay in there. Actually, you know what? We could add another delay. Just being, so let's add this delay here. So let's run through the sequence really quick so you don't get too confused. We might add some nodes in here, some cleanup nodes. All right, here we go. So let's bring this down a little bit. So what's happening? Okay. Right now, before we change it, it's going to go, we're going to say we're going to print what's in 0, which is stick. Then we're going to print which is in 1, which is apple. And then what we're going to do is we're going to delay it for 1 second. And then we're going to set the element of 1 to mango. So we're going to change this to mango, and then we're going to print that to the screen. Then we're going to go all the way down here, and then we're going to print what is in element 2, which is phone. All right, let's compile that. Let's save that. And it looks like we have an error here. Oh, we never wired this guy up to get that. There we go. Come on. We might have to drag it off. Here, let's go ahead and just drag that off. It's being silly. So let's drag this off. Type get ref and wire that in here. And then the element that I want is 1. So we could show that it changed the item. All right, let's press play. We have stick, apple, we changed it to mango, and then we have phone. So again, just practicing in visual scripting, understanding sequencing. Again, so eventually we're going to get to branching and looping, and then how we can change arrays.